So I call myself an accidental entrepreneur. Way back in, this was like pre-Facebook, when Facebook wasn't a thing, and all the moms had our little blog spot blogs, and that's how we kind of stay connected and shared what we were doing and whatever. Anyway.
So obviously you got YouTube, then there was a digital, like you put your cookbook out, right? And
Yeah.
that was like an interesting sort of next step in kind of bringing your blogging background to that. And then now what is your businesses? You're selling obviously products and stuff now too, right? Like actually.
Basically just a front-end sales channel. He developed a strategy because in his own business he wasn't profitable with the strategy.
Well, it's clearly working wonders for our clients, and it's crazy to me how many agencies don't know about this at all. Hi, Kathy. Welcome to the E-commerce Leader Podcast. We're so excited to have you here today with us. I love your story, and I'm super inspired by it, and I really feel like as we share it, and the listeners are going to enjoy it as well, and then I do think there's some really cool takeaways as well in terms of that journey and where you got from to where you are today. So I'm excited to jump into that. But first and foremost, I'd love you to tell our community, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, your journey, and so tell us that story, and then we'll jump into more details.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for having me. It's been fun to come here and speak a little bit differently than what I normally do. So I call myself an accidental entrepreneur. Way back in, this was like pre-Facebook, when Facebook wasn't a thing, and all the moms had our little blog spot blogs, and that's how we kind of stay connected and shared what we were doing and whatever. Anyway, I started in 2008. I started a little coupon blog just to show people what I was doing because I was learning things. 2009, I found out I was expecting baby number 7. I've got 8 kids for context.
Wow.
And at that point in time, I just had a 7-month-old. So it was a little bit scary. And at the same week of my first doctor's appointment for that 7th baby, my husband was laid off. And I had a friend that was kind of doing the blog with me, and she's like, you know what, we can make money doing this. And so we fretted and started teaching coupon classes and putting ads on the site. And anyway, long story short, it more than replaced his income and became, our main source of income. So that was, took about 2 years of a grind before that happened. Mm-hmm. And fast forward to 2019, I was at a blogging conference and visiting with an old friend. She has a recipe podcast, a recipe blog. And she was like, you know what, you need to get on YouTube, because she was doing YouTube, and just pushed me, just kind of opened up that awareness in my mind, because I also had recipes on my website. Anyway, so I was like, okay, I'm hiring you as a coach. Can I hire you as a coach? Because by this point in time, this was a solid I don't know how many years. A long time later, I had learned the best way to get anything done is to hire someone smarter than you to teach you how to do it, or outsource. So obviously I had to be the one doing YouTube. And so she taught me, and I started doing food on YouTube. It niched down to air fryer content. And in December 2020, so I started June 2020, December 2020, my channel, I think, was at 5,000 subscribers or 25, I can't remember. And it jumped up to 10,000 by the end of the month. And then by March 2021, I hit 100,000 subscribers. Wow. It just exploded.
Wow.
Anyway, and that really was a huge pivot in my business. I still have my original business, but now because of YouTube, I have 2 more businesses.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Fun.
So then what are you selling? So obviously you got YouTube, then there was a digital, you put your cookbook out, right? And
yeah.
that was like an interesting sort of next step and kind of bringing your blogging background to that. And then now what is your business? You're selling obviously products and stuff now too, right? Like the actual physical products.
Yeah. So it was kind of funny because my audience was like, we want a cookbook. And I was like, what? Because I would give the recipe.
Right.
Not only would I show every detail of it, I would write the entire recipe out in the YouTube description. I was just like, here you go. And they still wanted a cookbook and I was overwhelmed. So I did a digital first,
right.
And that did awesome. And then they were like, we want an actual cookbook. And so it took me a few months, but it was such a pain in the butt. But I figured out, I was like, I don't know how to do that.
Right.
Figured out how to do it. And then we put an order in for like 500 cookbooks the first weekend, or for the first order. And we sold that in the first weekend. And we were like, wow. Oh. So I think to date, I'm probably close to 40,000 cookbooks sold, which is self-published, no PR, just organic stuff. But the fun thing about YouTube is what I do is I would utilize Amazon affiliate and just like, here, buy this. I like this product, blah, blah, blah. And there were some top selling items and we were like, we could just, essentially white label those things.
Yeah.
So we ended up opening a Shopify store. We also have it on Amazon. And so I've got the cookbook and we have parchment paper liners. I made an air fryer cheat sheet magnet and then an instant read food thermometer are the 4 we have right now. And then we've got a whole bunch of digital thing and course and membership and all of that.
That's so cool. So really then the biggest, you would say, pivot point transition was the YouTube journey, right? Like that kind of was the amplifier of the entire business and really built that community, built your audience up. I'm really curious. So as you were blogging, obviously you kind of get a little bit of feedback from a blog in terms of traffic and, comments and all that kind of stuff. But YouTube took that to the entirely new level in terms of interaction, views, comments, stuff like that. So, but what's interesting to me is you didn't necessarily go to YouTube with, I'm going to do air fryers. It was, you were just putting out your normal content, right? And air fryers sort of took off in a viral nature over COVID. And so you were just kind of positioned, all of your hard work and what you were doing, putting the content out was sort of positioned at an opportune moment, and it just popped. So I'd love to kind of dive into some of the lessons and takeaways that you sort of learned in that process, because I think it's a really insightful journey, because for the most part, most brands actually are approaching their content and their product roadmap in reverse of what you did, right? Mm-hmm. You kind of did this reverse process, right? You started, which is really smart, which is a really brilliant move. You started with creating content, exercising, I would say almost like exercising the content muscle. Like you just got into the groove, you got into the rhythm, and you just were grinding on it, right? And then you get that pop in audience, right, off of YouTube, which is also a grind. It's a totally different format and style. It's not blogging anymore, right? Now you're producing video, you're editing video, you're doing all these things. And so all of that is incorporated into all of that. So I'd love to sort of understand, like, what were your big takeaways in that transition? And then when you were kind of making the decision to go with air fryer and lean into that content, like, obviously you had to say no to a lot of other content, right, that you were creating and really lean into it. What was that decision process like?
Yeah, so it is funny, and it wasn't a brilliant strategic move. It was just an accident.
Right.
I was just like, I wanted another revenue stream, and that was YouTube. And so my coach, what we did was we kind of had a large umbrella of recipes. That was the content I started to create. And within that, we did 5 or 6 different topics. So I did slow cooker, instant pot, air fryer, freezer meals, copycat, and maybe something else. I can't remember. And I would just alternate. At that point in time, I was uploading 2 times a week. and just alternating, and their strategy and the way you title things to tie them together, but basically teaching the algorithm what my channel was about. I actually had the channel since 2012, but there was unrelated. There was some couponing stuff. There was some little kid squiggly car review that was getting a ton of views, like from China or something. Anyway, after a few months, I was like, I think I should unlist those things that are completely irrelevant. And when I did that, that just really helped push, because you're teaching the algorithm what your content's about. So the first thing is you don't want to be random all over the place. So I had my topic, and I was still a little bit broad within recipes, but that's where I really learned, just like you said, it was the air fryer content that started to lift. And after a few months, I was like, I'm just going to go all air fryer. I'm not going to waste my time doing these other things. Nobody's watching, or it was too competitive, or nobody cared. But the fun thing is like, I used to do like Facebook Lives back in the day where we would do product reviews and things like that. So I was already aware of, the pacing and keeping people hooked, and I was comfortable being in front of camera. So I had that advantage. And so that's kind of where my edge was, because the air fryer content, there was content on YouTube, but really off the top of my head, there was only one creator doing it well, and he only did it every once in a while. Like, he wasn't all air fryer. So I got lucky, I guess, that way, from those old skills coming in and helping me here in YouTube and just making content better than how everybody else was. Now there's a ton of air fryer content.
Oh, I'm sure.
I haven't looked recently, but according to vidIQ and TubeBuddy, I was the highest ranked air fryer creator. Anyway, so I got that seat.
That's cool. And so what's also cool about that is, so obviously it happened. You're just creating. You didn't necessarily plan it, but that's what happens, right? You take risks. You go out there, you're testing things, and you get a really positive result, and then you lean into it. And now it's sort of built this whole brand around, the air fryer, and you're just doing the recipes. And you're almost like, you're like the go-to influencer, right? And when people want to do air fryer stuff, they're probably going to find your stuff, right? They're going to probably buy your cookbook and see your videos and all that stuff. What would you sort of recommend as as a best practice if you were sort of in the reverse? Like, you have actual products, you're building your brand, but one of the challenges is like content. Like, a lot of times, entrepreneurs who are doing Shopify or doing Amazon, they become really good at product development, right? Because it's sort of a product first. And then is there demand? Are people looking for it? Especially on Amazon, right? It's like, oh, is there enough demand for this product? What's the competition like? Okay, great. I'm good at understanding, identifying where there's opportunity, and I'm getting good at like developing these products and stuff like that. But then once you kind of get to that skill set, the next phase is really like, okay, well, now that I'm selling this, people are buying it. Like, how do I create really compelling content? Especially if I want to go out and go and do, Shopify and build my brand and really think about that branding. Content becomes a challenge, right? So what would you recommend to someone who's maybe the reverse of you? They started with a product, it's got a little bit of traction, and they want to start creating content. What would you recommend? What would be your big takeaways in terms of actions, what you'd be doing?
I would for sure don't try and sell people. Like, you just create your value content.
Yeah.
And even, I probably don't anymore, but just because I'm too busy and lazy, like, I still will give out full recipes in the description. I just stopped doing that portion of my YouTube, but my assistant's probably not doing it. But just still giving it. Everybody, they'll value you when you value them, right? And don't be afraid to share, because they're still going to want whatever it is you have. If they know you're not trying to sell them, if they're like, oh, wow, they're so giving, and especially if you're on YouTube specifically, and I would assume other platforms are like this too, but the algorithm, they want people on their platform They don't want them popping off to your store.
Right,
Although, you know, you can integrate your Shopify store with YouTube, and it is super awesome now that I can point and say, this is the product I'm talking about. And oh my gosh, I mean, that's a whole nother thing we haven't even talked about, is like how much money I have earned. And you can track that on your Shopify and see all this traffic coming now from YouTube. It's made the shopping experience so much easier, especially my audience is older. That, you know, they're like, how do I find the description?
Right.
Anyway, I got sidetracked because I
love that. That's relatively new.
Yes.
That just came out within the last probably 6 to 12 months, right?
Yes. Yeah. We just barely turned it on, I think, in October. And I was like, why did we wait so long?
Yeah, I know. It's a really cool feature. You know, it's kind of funny too, because I've worked with clients before and they had pretty decent, I mean, YouTube was always one of those things where it's like, okay, can you get the traffic from YouTube, right? Because once you're on YouTube, you have a tendency to stay on YouTube. Like they've designed it in order to keep you there. Same with other social platforms like Facebook, Instagram. They don't want you, leaving the platform because they make money on the ads, right? So they want to keep you there consuming the ad content so they can continue to make money. And so getting that traffic to a website can be challenging, right? So now that they're connecting that piece of it in and allowing you to surface that as a channel for Shopify is really, really cool. And I think that really helps sort of bridge that gap a little bit more efficiently. Because that is it's driving the actual sale. And you can get traffic. Pinterest is sort of the one exception, I think, to that rule, right? Where they straight up are happy to drive traffic because they kind of see themselves as a visual search engine, and they can drive a ton of clicks and a ton of traffic and all that stuff. But typically, the conversion on that traffic is sometimes a lot lower in my experience than even Facebook or even YouTube tends to be. So you got to track a higher, more engaged quality of user and visitor to the site, but Pinterest can drive massive volume too. So it's really interesting how it kind of all breaks down. But I love the fact that they integrated with Shopify and your YouTube. So if you have a YouTube channel and you have a Shopify store, make sure that you are looking into that as an option, because that's a great takeaway.
Yep. At the very least, you can just set up your store on the YouTube page. And I don't know well enough. I would think that you wouldn't be penalized if you're using the YouTube features that take people to your Shopify. I just don't, I haven't hard tested it or anything.
Sure. Well, you're still pretty new to that, adding that recently to the store. So I think that'd be interesting.
For me, I have an affiliate, I'm not trying to my goal is not to make money on AdSense. My goal is to make money on my products, because I make more from my products than I do on YouTube AdSense. So, anyway, it's an interesting thing. I should probably test it out, but I haven't.
Yeah, no, I think that's super, super good. So let's get into a little bit of the actual tactics on YouTube, because obviously you're crushing it. And there's some probably best practices just as a YouTube content creator that you're engaging with, right? So I'll just go top of mind off my head, right? Obviously, you're paying attention to click-through rate of your thumbnails, right? You're looking at hey, how are people engaging? Because that's a big driver. The engagement on the videos themselves, what are you looking at? What are you looking for? What do you sort of do internally as a best practice? Because obviously you're taking those learnings and saying, hey, well, let's tweak this. Maybe we can do this a little bit differently. If someone's falling off my videos here, so walk me through that sort of thinking and that process for you.
Right. Yeah. I love the YouTube analytics is just crazy brutal, because you can see, and they're like, here's a dip. You lost everyone's attention right here. Or,
right.
Or you held it really nicely. For me, for the content I have created, longer videos do better for me than for sure short. I mean, now they've extended short form, can be up to 3 minutes.
Right.
But before, when I was trying to make, one recipe in 4.5 minutes, YouTube just would not serve that out, because your video needs to be 8 minutes so they can get mid-roll ads in.
Sure.
So I have videos, I have some that are about an hour long even. And it's kind of nice because I just pretty much repurpose I know all this different content I have, and I pull from it, and here's a theme. And YouTube's like, oh, I'm like, who in the world wants to watch an hour's worth of air fry? No one. But they do. The average view duration's longer, so YouTube will serve that one up, and those tend to always get more views and make more money. But that also doesn't serve my current audience. So you really have to like serve your people, and then make content that also pulls new people in. And then you have to do the one-offs. You know, it's such a game. But yes, understanding what is your pacing, you'll get that from looking at your engagement and seeing where people are dropping. And then just even within their different, so now I have air fryer and I have different, like my 15-minute recipes or recipes for 2 or 5 ingredient recipes. So then I kind of have my subtopics within there, and I can see, okay, well, this one's not resonating anymore with people. I'm going to stop creating this type.
Right.
And then I'm always trying to test new things, new keywords, like phrases and things. Anyway, it can be, yes, it's tiring. It's tiring, but it's rewarding too, because you sure get to connect with people. Yeah. I mean, building a relationship of know, like, and trust. I don't know any other great way to do it. Well, maybe Instagram, but anyway, they come into my home. They let it.
That's super cool. That it kind of leads me to another question around other channels. So obviously YouTube is the primary one. How do you use that content, or do you even use that content to kind of chop it up, put it out in other places, see if you can kind of duplicate some level of performance or engagement across multiple socials?
Yes. I hired my daughter, who is a 20-something. I was like, can you just do my Instagram? So it's kind of fun because she just tells me, okay, we need to make this. But she'll go through, repurpose content. And then I've started using some of that content that she's created to put onto YouTube Shorts. And it's so funny. It'll do great on Instagram and terrible here, or vice versa. And I'm like, what the heck? Anyway, it's so strange. I mean, that's the reality of it, right? It's like some content's going to perform a lot better, and just depends on search and where that stuff's at. So no, I think that is totally the case. You know, content you don't know until you test it. Right.
So if there was one thing that you would do different, like looking back at sort of I'm sure there's a lot, you know, but like there's like one big outstanding thing you're like, I wish I would have done this sooner or better or different, what would that be?
I don't know. I probably would have created more products sooner, but I didn't.
Physical or digital, or both?
The digital, well, both. Yeah, because I just barely launched membership, and I'm in almost 5 years. It's hard to say, because I just like, there's value in all the failures too. Like
100%.
Those first videos are so terrible, but I mean, embarrassingly terrible. But you just have to get through that terrible river of misery, right? To get to a place where we create better content.
100%. It's kind of funny you mentioned that. I was listening to Russell Brunson, right, with ClickFunnels, and he was talking about his podcasting, and he just like, I started doing it driving in my car, and, you know, like the whole thing he got started. But he was like, he's like, the first podcast it's like that we did, they were just terrible. In fact, he said a buddy of mine, somebody on his team that he hired, he was helping to work with it, like went through and like listened to all the back, and he's like, man, the first 100 were brutal, but after that you found your rhythm and it started getting really, really engaging and good. So yeah, it worked out. And now, you know, obviously got a big podcast now, but he's like, yeah, that first 100 episodes were just brutally bad. Yeah. And he's like, I didn't want to hear that. He's like, that's why I never paid attention to that stuff. He's like, I didn't want to know. He's like, I didn't even know how to figure that out. He's like, to begin with. But then additionally, I was like, I kind of don't really want to know that. But now it obviously worked out, because he's like, it actually worked to his benefit, because he's like, I didn't know that I was so terrible. I just kept doing it. And he's like, and because I just kept doing it, it got better and better and better until finally it was a good outcome and a good product. It's like, if I might have known how bad it was, or you got the bad feedback on it, I might have been like, I probably would have done it, right? Because it probably hurt my ego too much or something. And so, so there's some benefit in just doing the grind. and continuing to polish and get better and optimize.
Right. The very first video I filmed, we like set up 2 DSLR cameras. We're trying to, get all the things. And I was looking for perfectionism.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't working. So then I just moved to my phone. That was so much easier. And I used a phone for like the first 9 months. And the ones that were filmed with my phone have over 7 million views now. I mean,
amazing.
It's fine. It works. The sound is right. The sound and your content is what's most important.
Yep. Yeah, that's totally true.
Value.
Yeah, for sure. No, 100%. I think that is. So what's next for you? Like, what is the next thing that you're going to continue to push on? Like that's always a fun question.
Right. Yeah. We have probably a list of 10 more products and 2 that we're trying to invent. Is that the word? There's a huge problem I know that needs to be solved. And we're just figuring out how to do that in a cost-effective way. Yeah, but it's also scary. It's like
it is.
It's expensive in learning.
For sure. When you start looking at those tooling costs for manufacturing, you start to get big numbers.
Oh, yeah. So that's our focus this year, for sure.
That's very cool. Well, I appreciate you jumping on the podcast, telling your story. Some awesome takeaways, when it comes to just making sure, have a plan. Like, to me, like the biggest thing was you were consistently creating content, regardless of how well you thought it was. You just were doing it, right? And I think that is one of the biggest secrets of success, is that you're just doing it consistently over time. That's right. Like, I heard this quote the other day that said, you have to keep doing stuff to make the necessary number of mistakes in order to get great at it. If you don't, you just start from zero. Like every single time, you're just starting back from zero. So you have to keep plugging away. You have to keep grinding on it to get it to where you made the number of mistakes you need to make in order to, gain competency and really begin to see the results for it. So kudos to you and your team for doing a great job doing that. I hope you inspire some other e-commerce folks here on the podcast listening, that if they're not creating content for their customers, they're leaving a lot of money on the table, right?
Yeah, it's such a fun way to connect and to serve your customers. And YouTube's so good at finding your people once they figure out what you're about.
No, 100%, and that's really a huge driver too, because like I would say, like of the customers and the clients who I've worked with, right, the ones that really had the most success, the ones who, or maybe even the fastest success, right, in building their brand and really building that, were really, really clear on who their customers were and how they serve them. And so this is a great way to sort of build that feedback engine and really understand what that needs. I think it was another marketer, I think it's that I heard say this, it was just stuck with me. And he said, you have 3 types of customers in your business. You have the customers that you want. There's the customers that you think you have. There's the customers that you want to have, like the high paying, good AOV, LTV, big, like those are the customers I want. And then there's the customers you really have, and so the insight is like, well, how much of that is overlap, if any, and how do I get to the truth of understanding who my customers really are and how I really serve them? Because to be fair, you might have a certain set of customers that really are truly your customers, but your content, your messaging is kind of reaching out, trying to get this ideal customer, when reality is you chop your customers sitting there and you have the opportunity to serve them. Doesn't mean you can't serve both, but you can't ignore the ones that are currently there. So it's just a good reminder to think about what are the best ways to get engaged with your customer. One way too, that I love, that's not even related to social, it's after you actually have your Shopify store up and running, send out a survey and even incentivize it, send it out to your buyer, like someone who buys from you, send them out a little survey and offer them like a $20, gift card to your store if they are able to, and then ask really interesting questions about, why did you pick our store? Did you consider anybody else, in the process? Like, you can actually get actual business intelligence from it and kind of really understand the language. Like, how would you, one that I really love is, how would you describe our store to your friend? Or our brand? How would you describe our brand to your friend? Because you are then getting the language that your customers are using or are looking to use and interpreting what you're saying back to that you can then incorporate into copy, incorporate into your branding, all the things you want to do. So that's a really powerful way. Once you sort of have your store, you're kind of getting customers to think about that.
Awesome tip. Yeah.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. If anyone wants to connect with you, what would be the best way to do that?
KathyYoder.com is just kind of my landing page, and then empoweredcooks.com. If you need an air fryer in your life and not sure how to do that, go to empoweredcooks.com and I can hook you up over there. So
perfect. Well, you'll see both those links in the show notes in the description. So I encourage you to check that out, KathyYoder.com. Get some good resources there. Thank you so much, Kathy. It's been a pleasure. And I look forward to having you back in the near future.
Thank you.